You can get this and every other episode of the Rocking Horror Picture Show on Patreon, uncensored. The link is in the description below. Warning. Absolutely everything I'm about to talk about is beyond sickening, disgusting, and vile to its very core. Okay, I'm done selling you the movie. Let's jump in.
Stay!
The other night, I sat down at my local Cineplex, or more accurately, my local Cinemark, and watched the latest blockbuster hit, Obsession, an indie horror movie that ended up breaking several box office records. This movie is about an uncharismatic man who fails time and again to muster up the courage to ask out his crush. So he decides that letting things happen naturally is lame, and instead forces her to become his girlfriend through the use of a magical wish stick that grants any wish when broken in two. But be careful what you wish for. There might actually be negative ramifications to forcing someone to love you. You know, like what that person actually wants? I really thought this movie was amazing. But there's one thing that I think needs to be discussed. The idea that this movie is scary because it depicts an obsessive girlfriend. I'm here to argue that the true horror of this movie is actually the obsessiveness of the man making the wish, and the ways in which he goes along with enslaving the body and mind of his crush in order to get what he thinks he wants out of life. That is far creepier than any other interpretation, and it's the one that stuck with me long after leaving this movie. Also, there's one more concept I'd like to put to bed in this essay. The idea that the love interest, Freaky NIKKI, is too much. I'm here to argue the exact opposite, that Freaky NIKKI is actually dream girl material, and you'd be a fool to fumble her. In fact, I'd go so far as to boldly endorse 85% of her behavior in this film. The other 15%? That's fine. I can fix her. So, today's Rocking Horror will be delivered in two parts. The first part is spoiler-free. Part 2, however, I'm spoiling the fuck out of every aspect of this movie. So, if you haven't seen it yet, do yourself a favor and stop watching at that mark. And then, come back when you've actually gotten to witness this horror gem. It's definitely worth the $12.50, I assure you. So, let's explore why this movie is actually so scary, and why Freaky NIKKI is actually the perfect girlfriend, even at her worst. Before we continue, consider smashing that subscribe button if your taste in movies runs as black as mine. And possibly a like if you want to egg me on to keep watching this shit. Obsession wrestles with a core concept that is actually quite scary. What is the cost of forcing someone to love you? The idea isn't new. It's been explored in novels like The Housemaid, also a major motion picture starring Sydney Sweeney. I recommend you check it out. And it hits home because it forces one to ponder the subject of agency and consent. How much of oneself is someone expected to sacrifice in order to keep their partner happy? A very haunting question. One that is the central focus of the film's protagonist, Bear. Bear is the perfect vehicle to explore this subject with. He is a really unlikable person. I personally couldn't stand the guy, but that's kind of the point. He's insecure, whiny, and kind of pathetic. No wonder NIKKI doesn't like him. The dude has absolutely no charm whatsoever. And worse yet, he's silently lying in wait in the friend zone. So he's really not her friend at all. He's like a vulture patiently waiting for a corpse. The premise of the movie revolves around Bear making a wish to have NIKKI love him, regardless of her true feelings. And his wish is granted instantaneously with the use of a magic wishing willow branch. As the wish slowly becomes reality, we quickly realize our boy is basically the equivalent of a dog who finally caught the mailman. He has no idea what to do other than stare at his catch and think to himself, okay, what now? To quote my favorite fictitious alcoholic writer,
sometimes it's better not to touch your dreams. Take it from someone who knows.
The wish works. NIKKI falls further than in love. She falls into the depths of madness and obsession, which is supposed to be one of the selling points for the scares this movie has to offer. And yet, I just couldn't help but find even the most freaky of Freaky NIKKI's outbursts kind of charming. I'll go over the specifics in part 2, where I'm finally allowed to spoil everything, but honestly, her temper tantrums, her jealousy, her constant need for affection, and her awkward public declarations of love, I saw all of that and I thought,
suddenly, life has new meaning to me.
To be fair, you're talking to a huge Death Note fan who's always wanted his own Misa Amane, though I would treat her much better than Light Yagami did. But the real horror of Obsession isn't that it's scary when a girl is too into you, although a lot of people have seen it that way. I think a much scarier way to watch the film is through the eyes of NIKKI herself. You're witnessing a girl forced to act against her will in order to please the needs of someone else, all because he was too pathetic to woo her with his charm, and needed to force this affection out of her with what amounts amounts to a magic wand. And knowing she's still in there, screaming for a way out, it makes this one of the more haunting films in recent memory. Given everything I've told you, you'd think that the hero would be considered a literal rapist for the wish he's made. But the thing that makes the wish element work so well is that he doesn't even believe that it will come true when he makes it. It's almost a cute, desperate little wish that he made in the middle of another failed attempt to ask his dream girl out. All of us have been there in some form. I wish this person would love me. But we probably don't mean it literally. We mean it more like, I wish this person would use their own deductive reasoning to come to the conclusion that I'm the one. Not, I wish they would do something they really don't want to do and date me anyways. That's kind of creepy. That's what makes the hero's struggle one that's easy to relate to. I can't even fault the guy for going along with it at first, knowing he probably didn't believe that the wish had actually come true to begin with. But by the time he realizes what's actually going on, he's able to back out, but doesn't. The title of the movie goes both ways. Sure, Bear creates an obsession in NIKKI, but it's also the result of his own obsession with her, his need to control and possess her. When you really think about it, the title of the movie might be more relevant to Bear than it is to NIKKI. The greatest strength this movie possesses, no pun intended, is the strength of its acting. Most of the praise usually goes to the film's breakout star, Indy Navarrete, but let's not forget the other powerhouse hitter performance here, that of Michael Johnston, who is the reason Freaky Nicky's character plays so well. Johnston's performance is naturally painful to watch. The dude is drowning in his insecurities. He's almost ashamed to exist. You just see him and you already know
you lack confidence.
And that's why his longing for love matters. Freaky Nicky is undeniably the star of the show, but Bear is the perfect protagonist to tell this tale through, and Johnston's casting for this film is just as perfect as Indy's. One thing that really sticks out to me is how effectively the film incorporates jump scares. Most of the time, these are used as ridiculous gimmicks to arbitrarily up the excitement factor of a horror movie, without earning it through relevant plot details. Yet here, every use of a jump scare is directly tied to the emotional state of the characters. I'll give specific examples in part 2, but let's just say each jump scare is usually tied to a moment of clarity from Nicky, or from Bear as he watches her hide in the shadows, realizing she's acting like something more demonic than human. My heart was racing throughout most of the runtime, in anticipation for what bizarre actions Freaky Nicky might take next. And as one final note in the spoiler-free section, I really appreciated how most of the lore for this film is easily explained through the runtime. I can't lie, I'm kind of annoyed by how a lot of movies recently have a "you have to have read over 100 threads on Reddit to understand what the film is really about" kind of vibe. The premise is straightforward enough to work on its own, without having to lean entirely on the expanded universe or whatever. Although I hear Curry's next film is also based in the Obsession universe. That's cool. But better yet, it still has plenty of depth. The Wishing Willow lore is fairly straightforward, although the rules are a little strange at times. I'll go over more examples in part 2, but there's one wish that his friend makes that I'm just shocked that more people didn't make. However, most of the rules are not only well crafted, but haunting as well, and not requiring the rulebook of your average Death Note. So, if you haven't seen this movie yet, I definitely recommend catching it in theaters. The experience is much better, with louder scares and a bigger screen to drink in all the details with. But ultimately, you're gonna wanna see it in theaters because the studio assured that this movie will stay there for a little while longer due to its blockbuster success. So if you were planning to watch it on streaming, you might be waiting a little bit longer. Okay, that's the spoiler-free portion. We're now on to the part of the program where we spoil the fuck out of everything. So, if you haven't seen the movie, that's your warning to bail. Alright, here we go. We start with a lonely shot of the protagonist, Bear, who is rehearsing a "will you be more than just my friend" speech to his unsupportive friends at a diner. Bear is completely lacking in what the kids might refer to as sauce. Riz. Bear's about as charming as a man on the neighborhood watch list, and his friends all let him know how off-putting he is, criticizing his dweeby little speech with ruthlessly cutting observations that borderline on insulting. And Bear's best friend, Ian, gives him what is probably the most practical advice possible. He says, "Dude, stop being a sissy, just ask her out." By the time this opening scene is done, we realize one brutal truth. Bear is a completely despicable protagonist. He's neglectful, finding his cat dead in the beginning of the movie because he left his prescription medication on the floor next to the fucking cat food. I already hated him the second this happened. Not to mention the director, Curry Barker, for refusing to leave that cat the fuck alone. The intro is bad enough, but by the time we get to the sandwich scene were just like,
don't fuck with cats.
Bear is also a spineless loser, the kind who will happily orbit the girl he likes for years in the hope of one day having a shot with her by pretending to be her friend until he's clear to make his move. A creepy tale that is, sadly, as old as time. Bear wants to buy Nikki a little something something just to show her how much he really cares. Instead of finding a cool crystal necklace to replace the one she lost, he discovers something else entirely. A magical wish stick that supposedly grants any wish for the low cost of $6.99. Honestly, this is one of the elements of the movie that is kind of annoying to me. What, Bear is one of only a handful of people to actually use the product, and Ian is the first person to ask for $1 billion? I'm pretty sure these Wish Willow things would be very famous on the news if they actually were so effective at this whole wish granting thing. But Sleeve, you always nitpick all the tiny details. That's true, because I can think of a fix for this immediately. Just make it so only occasionally does this wish stick actually grant wishes, not no one has ever had the guts to use it because it's a collector's item. Get out of here with that bullshit. Hey, 1 in 100 grant wishes. Every other one doesn't. There, I fixed a bullshit plot detail in 2 seconds. So Bear buys a wishing willow for Nikki. Then he attends a friendly bar gathering amongst his friend group after work. Every single person in this friend group works at the same music shop. Yet another small annoyance I have with this movie. Something that drives me crazy actually the more I think about it. You're telling me that 4 best friends all got hired at the same place and that place they've all been commonly hired at is a music store, despite the fact that none of them look like f***ing musicians at all, save for Sarah, who at least has a few tattoos and piercings to justify the part. The rest of them are far too squeaky clean for rock and roll. Anyway, this boozy night out is where we meet the star of the show, Freaky Nikki, a nickname that, upon first utterance, has mildly sexual connotations to it. Okay, major sexual connotations to it. But as the movie progresses, her nickname becomes much more darkly and hilariously relevant. Freaky takes on a whole new meaning. The thing that immediately stands out about Nikki is this. She seems to be a lovely girl. She's fun, friendly, generous, real, and probably most importantly to our protagonist, really pretty. Sadly, this is probably the only part that Bear sees, to be quite honest. Nikki is far more likable than Bear, and Bear's crush on her is visibly obvious. The dude is basically afraid to breathe wrong when in her presence. Every time he looks to Nikki with those longing eyes, it makes me think of the rants of a certain supreme gentleman from Isla Vista. Look at this beautiful girl, and here I am, miserable. But fate aligns when Nikki is driven home by Bear after their night out, leaving our boy with a real shot at getting the girl of his dreams. It's time for him to unload the "I have a dream of be my girlfriend" speeches, to proclaim his love in a way that's grand enough to shake the heavens and move mountains. And instead, he's like, okay, later, Freaky Nikki. And Nikki looks back to him the same way Chris Hansen looks at predators when they spill their darkest confessions, with utter disgust. Not the reaction you want from the girl you're Twitter-pated with. This sets the baseline for Nikki's treatment of Bear. You can see that he's got a cute little crush that's starting to tear him up inside. And Nikki is hoping she can apply just the right amount of anesthesia to his crush to make it to the next round of their friendship without making things too awkward. As she walks away from his cringe attempts at flirtation, Bear finally decides, you know what? I don't care if this wishing willow thing is a cheap toy I bought for $6.99 at a random outlet. I'm taking my chances, rolling the dice, and the payoff better be my crush delivered on a silver platter. So he says the thing from the trailer, probably not expecting it to work.
I wish Nikki Freeman loved me more than anyone in the entire world.
But then... And now we're entering the heart of the tale at hand. And also, the reason for the title. Because it's not just Bear who's got an obsession. Now, Nikki is the obsessive one. And Nikki finally lives up to her nickname, being one of the freakiest of all the cinematic freaks. Freaky Nikki's tactics are brutal. She starts off by claiming that her father recently informed her of some very unfortunate news.
I got the results of the test back. I definitely have
Regular
cancer.
And Nikki begs Bear to spend the night. It wasn't even that long ago that she was practically running away from him like a teenager would from Freddy or Jason. Now she's like, so, wanna be my teddy bear? To be fair, Bear has no idea what's actually come over her here. It's confusing, sure, but there's no reason to believe in magical wishes just yet. So it's understandable why he brings Nikki home, hoping to be the one to comfort her in her time of need. Honestly, he's probably legitimately concerned for her as a friend by this point in the movie. His defenses, however, are basically non-existent. The second Nikki tries to get closer to him, he puts up about as much of a fight as a cornered Paul brother. And this is where one of the best jump scares in the movie takes place. As obsessed Nikki moves her way in, weakening his resolve with kisses and affection, she suddenly wakes up, as if the version of Nikki that's newly in love with Bear is something else entirely, and the real Nikki has temporarily reawoken. And real Nikki is horrified by the circumstances. This is actually the strongest and scariest element to the plot. The fact that Nikki has changed. She's still in there, and her body has been captured by something otherworldly, forced to play the role of prisoner inside of her own self while she does things against her will. That is psychological horror at its finest. Bear eventually backs off of Nikki's charm, convinced that she must be high or drunk, the only plausible explanations for her affectionate behavior towards him. So he drops her off at her place the next day. And then, that night, Nikki shows up at his doorstep once again. And she's like,
I was on ecstasy last night.
and Bear realizes, hey, fate's giving me another shot at the dream girl here, sober no less. So he invites Nikki in, and Nikki professes to Bear,
I really, really, really like you.
and Bear is like,
Oh, yeah, I know.
no, of course he doesn't say that. He's like, ew, why? Like a true man of character, completely confused about how the opposite sex could ever find him appealing in any way. Nikki amps up her sales pitch about her true feelings towards Bear, and eventually convinces him to bump uglies and dive headlong into a whirlwind romance, supposedly his desperate dream, and they live happily ever after. Ha, just kidding. You didn't think it was that easy, did you? Nikki starts becoming a little strange, like she's been installed with a new set of code that her current hardware doesn't quite know how to handle. Her actual wants, hopes, and desires are now buried underneath this new programming that she's forced to operate under, and sometimes the new code drives her nuts. Freaky Nikki can't help herself as she slowly becomes more and more freaky. While they both work at the music store, she stares at Bear in the background as he talks to his coworkers, like a total freak. She also watches him sleep while standing in the corner of the room and moving around like a stop-motion monster flick. And whenever Bear tries to bring up something that she doesn't like the lie about her father's terminal illness, for example, Nikki responds with a huge public spectacle that forces Bear to put his concerns on the back burner. Plus, whenever he tries to leave her for a few moments, she responds with an indignant "Stay!" She also tries to keep him from leaving the house by duct taping the door closed. You know, loving girlfriend stuff. Nothing screams devotion like standing in the same spot for an entire day, stewing in your own filth while you wait for your partner to get home from work. Honestly, not a terribly inaccurate representation of many men's expectations for their significant others. Stay home, look cute, do as I say. The cost of admission for some traditional arrangements. As mentioned earlier, there are several scenes where we get a window into what the real Nikki is thinking and feeling. She is occasionally able to break back into reality, though she can only steer the wheel for brief moments. Most of the time, we only get mere glimpses into the terror that this situation is inspiring in real Nikki. And these are, without a doubt, the most powerful scenes in the entire movie. The ones that stuck with me the longest. I'll use one of my favorite instances to illustrate this point. Bear calls the number on the back of the Wishing Willow box, hoping to find answers with customer support. Clearly having never tried this route with any other products, naively believing that some faceless company will actually care about your problems. Hello, technical support.
The wish is ruining my life!
That's unfortunate, sir. No refunds, have a good day. Shockingly, somebody answers the phone, and Bear asks this person to revise his wish. Not even reverse it, just revise it so it works a little bit better for him. The voice on the other end explains that only his death will set that person free, or the death of the person who has been cursed. Also, the man on the phone wants to assure Bear that the real Nikki is still in there somewhere. And then he lets her speak into the receiver, or I guess more accurately, lets her scream into the receiver. This scene haunted me. Hearing Nikki beg for help from whatever realm she's been banished to, it was one of the strongest illustrations as to how horrific this wish has become, not only for Bear, but more importantly for her. Another great scene that illustrates this dynamic features Bear and Nikki in bed. Nikki is fast asleep, until Bear notices faint weeping coming from her side of the bed. Bear asks her what's wrong, and Nikki explains, "She's sleeping. Please, just kill me." Bear is confused by the request, and Nikki reaffirms it. Please, this is the real me. Please just kill me. Set me free from this nightmare. And Bear asks, what's so bad about being with me? And then Nikki drops the line that makes this movie hit that much bleaker for me. God damn. This line is heartbreaking. She's never been Bear's. She's forced to be with him against her will. The Nikki in front of him, the one that acts like a hopelessly obsessed girlfriend, whatever she truly wants, doesn't matter anymore. She's now forced to play the role of someone she's never signed up to be. I really think this is where 90% of the terror of this movie really comes from. Not Bear's experience, Nikki's. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the point where Freaky Nikki becomes the perfect girlfriend. A lot of this scene was meant to illustrate how freaky and obsessed she's become. But to me, I just saw a girl I would marry in an instant. As mentioned, I'm a huge Death Note fan, looking for my own Misa Misa. But this girl who's a little too obsessive and jealous, not gonna lie, kind of a turn on. Feel free to flame me for it in the comments. First, she recites an odd retelling of Hansel and Gretel at a party. Her version is far darker and far more incestuous than most people probably remember the original tale to be, and it freaks everyone out. But I was just sitting there in the theater thinking, aw, she reads. A little bookworm. Then they play a game of Jenga in which dares are written on the pieces. Bear picks out a dare to kiss the girl to his left, who happens to be Sarah, the girl who's been crushing on Nikki's boy toy. And Nikki stands up furiously, wearing the most sarcastically large frown that one can possibly twist their face into. She wordlessly stands behind Sarah, scooches her chair out of the way, and lines herself up for the kiss instead. Again, this was used to illustrate her freakiness, but I was just like, aw, what a jealous little lover face. I can't remember exactly what she says to the rest of the room after joyously kissing Bear, but it goes something along the lines of,
and everyone in this room will die, never feeling the strength of connection I have felt with my bear.
The whole room stares at her in silence. Nikki eventually realizes that nobody's coming along with her on that one, so she sympathetically says, heh, I'm kidding, guys, it's a joke. Nobody comes along with her on that. So she then defiantly says,
okay, fine, I'm not joking, deal with it.
Fucking dream girl material. That's goddamn right, deal with it. You can't handle this kind of twin flame? Get the fuck out of the kitchen. Or wherever twin flames are birthed. Stars, perhaps? The point is, that's the correct answer. And this is where everything starts descending into pure madness. You see, Sarah is convinced that Nikki is actually trying to get back at Ian because the two have been casually hooking up for about 2 years. Damn, Nikki, you're out here using our boy's friend as a sneaky link while he's dying inside trying to get with you? I'm kidding, she can fuck whoever she likes. But this information hits Bear right in the gut, realizing that Freaky Nikki may not actually be his one and only. And as one glimmer of hope for this grim situation he's found himself in, Sarah confirms Nikki's inquiry from the beginning of the movie, the one about Sarah's true feelings towards Bear. And as it turns out, she never really gets to tell us, because Freaky Nikki shows up in a murderous, jealous frenzy and smashes her face to lasagna with a brick. She then tells a horrified Bear, don't worry, doll, I'll get rid of the body. I'm a good girl, teehee. Bear is able to get away from Nikki long enough to return to the store that he had originally bought the Wishing Willow from. However, these products are single use, even if you buy a new one. The person is only granted one wish and can't break future willows for others. But, as the cashier points out, you can just get somebody else to cancel out your wish. So, he goes to his utterly trustworthy best friend, Ian, and he begs Ian to use his wish to reverse the one about Nikki. And Ian, predictably, is like,
I wish for $1 billion.
my man, fuck your problems, Bear. I'm here to make that motherfucking bread. It starts raining money, and Bear runs from Ian, disgusted by his selfishness as always. First you fuck my girl, then you use your wish to make money. What an asshole. Must be shameful to get mogged by a guy who looks like Eddie from Silent Hill 2. The home stretch is really an intense ride. Bear goes racing back to his home, where he finds Nikki, now covered in the same tattoos that Sarah had, dressed like her as well. And she has Sarah's corpse propped up, a lot like how Art the Clown did in the original Terrifier. Then, when Ian shows up to the house to declare his new tax bracket, Nikki pops around right through his skull. And when Bear finally escapes to the bathroom, he realizes The only way out of this is to follow his dearly departed kitty's example and OD on pills. Bear devours a bottle of pills, but then, after eating all of them, he suddenly feels compelled to be with NIKKI, to accept her love and be by her side. This is because NIKKI has used the extra Wishing Willow wand to force Bear to love her. A cruelly ironic twist. But before he can return to her and profess his own obsessive love, Bear dies in her arms from an OD. And before NIKKI can kill herself in grief, she wakes up from this horrible spell that she's been under for most of the movie, finally herself again. The condition for her freedom has been met. Bear, the Wishmaker, is dead. And unfortunately, NIKKI has come to her senses in the midst of a horrible crime scene in which she'll no doubt be blamed for the entirety of. NIKKI screams horribly at the brutality of it all, and then, as these screams wail out, the credits roll on the TV in front of her. What a delightfully tragic ending. My favorite kind. It takes a truly special type of depraved soul to close out a story by either ending or ruining everybody's lives. Mad props, Curry. I hate fairy tale endings, and you steered as far from that territory as humanly possible. Mad fucking props, my boy. Okay, that's the movie Obsession. Any questions? As I've mentioned, this movie isn't really about NIKKI's obsession with Bear. The real focus is Bear's obsession with NIKKI. I've read various blogs declaring that the true horror of this movie is the way that the main character tries to own and control NIKKI. And that's absolutely correct. But it's also a diabolical wish fulfillment fantasy that points out something very crucial. The most hopeless of romantics can never truly be satisfied. That's why this wish is impossible in every single world. There's no such thing as getting the exact person you want without having that person sacrifice a bit of themselves. It's always a compromise between two people. And taking that choice away from a person doesn't end well ever. I honestly can't help but think of that Isla Vista supreme gentleman while writing this essay. That type of guy, he thinks that women hold the sole key that will unshackle them from their life's misery. If only the right girl gave him their love and affection, everything would magically get better. It's a sadly common fantasy, the idea that your life's fixes reside with somebody outside of yourself. Unfortunately, this is an impossibly selfish way to see other people, as band-aids for your own emotional damage. And yet that's kind of what the modern world teaches us, that we're mere vessels for other people's desires. Or on the other end, people are commodities to enjoy and discard, like fast food or a pack of cigarettes. One of the main reasons I find this current day and age to be so damn depressing. This phenomenon isn't linked to incel culture alone. Far from it, in fact. This is something people do to partners all the time. There are men who date women as a trophy rather than a person. And there are some women who use men in similar ways, seeing their boyfriend as accessories rather than real people. Like he's the latest handbag to add to her collection. Who cares what the other person truly wants? It's painfully common in the modern world to objectify our love interests while draining the person of their humanity in order to better fit them for our own ideals. And the people who end up in that situation, where they're forced into a role to fulfill another person's needs, that world is lonely and oftentimes miserable, leaving the person screaming in silence, left unsure about what they truly need outside of this relationship dynamic. That's the terror that stuck with me after leaving the theater. Not that a woman can get so obsessed with you that she'll ruin your life, that you can become so obsessed with someone that you might end up ruining their life. We rarely see ourselves as the villain in our own life story, much like how Bear clearly doesn't see his intentions as nefarious. But stripping away one's agency to assuage the other's worries? Objectively villainous. That's why we here at the Rocking Horror Picture Show would like to advocate for people's ability to do what they want outside of the confines of a wish stick. Forcing people to do things they don't want to do is bad, folks. If you were a loved one or forcing people to do things against their will, please dial 1-800 and then do exactly that. Anyway, that just about does it for this week's episode of the Rocking Horror Picture Show. Let me know what your thoughts were on Obsession in the comments below. Did you love it? Hate it? Haven't seen it and only watched part 1 of this essay? Or did you let me spoil the whole thing for you? Whatever the case may be, let me know all about it in the comments below. I'm your host, Sleeve T, and as always, I'm doing just fine.
What's up, everybody?
It's your boy, Sleeve T. I know that I got the product name wrong in this video. It's the One Wish Willow, not the Wishing Willow. My apologies. But if you liked what you saw besides that little slip, consider checking out my Patreon in the link below. All episodes are uncensored, with more blood and less bleeps. Plus, you'll get your name in the credits right here to give you a little bit of credit for helping out this depraved little project. Hopefully I'll see you guys then. And until next time, I'm your boy, Sleeve T. Rock and roll.